Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Gunatmakani Indriyani Bhutadi Prabhava Guna Manasarva Vikaratma Buddhir Vijnana Rupini. Gunatmakani Indriyani Bhutadi Prabhava Guna Manasarva Vikaratma Buddhir Vijnana Rupini. Guna Atmakani, attached to the qualities. Indriyani, the senses. Bhuta Adi, material ego. Prabhava, influenced by. Guna, the modes of material nature. Manaha, the mind. Sarva, all. Vikara, affection, happiness and distress. Atma, form. Buddhi, intelligence. Vijnana, deliberation. Rupini, featuring. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. The sense organs are attached to the modes of material nature, and the modes of material nature are products of the false ego. The mind is subjected to all kinds of material experiences, happiness and distress, and the intelligence is the feature of the mind's deliberation. Let me read it again. Translation: the sense organs are attached to the modes of material nature, and the modes of material nature are products of the false ego. The mind is subjected to all kinds of material experiences, happiness and distress, and the intelligence is the feature of the mind's deliberation. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Illusioned by the material nature, the living entity identifies with false ego. More clearly, when the living entity is entrapped by the material body, he at once identifies with the bodily relationships, forgetting his own identity as spirit soul. This false ego associates with different modes of material nature, and thus the senses become attached to the modes of material nature. Mind is the instrument for feeling different material experiences, but intelligence is deliberative and can change everything for the better. The intelligent person, therefore, can attain salvation from the illusion of material existence by proper use of intelligence. Read it again. The intelligent person, therefore, can attain salvation from the illusion of material existence by proper use of intelligence. An intelligent person can detect the awkward position of material existence and thus begin to inquire as to what he is, why he is subjected to different kinds of miseries, and how to get rid of all miseries, and thus, by good association, an advanced, intelligent person can turn towards the better life of self-realization. It is advised, therefore, that an intelligent person associate with the great sages and saints who are on the path of salvation. By such association, one can receive instructions which are able to slacken the conditioned soul's attachment for matter, and thus the intelligent man gradually gets rid of the illusion of matter and false ego and is promoted to the real life of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Good morning, everyone. Hare Krishna to everyone, and thank you for joining this class this Sunday. Today we are discussing the second canto, chapter 10, text 32 from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is a very critical verse as we've been reading over the last several weeks. It encapsulates a lot of what the Srimad Bhagavatam is talking about, and it is kind of summarizing a lot of things that we have read so far and what we will be reading so far in terms of who and what creation is all about, and who the source of all of that creation is. So thank you once again, and maybe I can give you a little more context in terms of what we've been doing so far, in terms of the readings that we've been doing so far. So in this 10th chapter of the second canto, Sukadev Goswami is really elaborating on the 10 divisions covered in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Like I said, a lot of this, it's a summary of these 10 divisions that are discussed in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And what are those 10 divisions, right? We read it in the first verse of this chapter. It is about the creation of the universe and the associated or the corresponding sub-creation, the planetary systems, the protection by the Lord, the creative impetus, right? The creation, how did this creation come about? What was the impetus for that? The change of the manus, the periodic leads that we've had in terms of the Manavantaras and, the manus that have governed and continue to govern the various periods in time. The science of God, returning home, back to Godhead, liberation, and finally, the summum bonum, right? What is the bottom line? What does all of this mean? Because this chapter especially comes across as a very and highly technical, subject matter. So it can be a little dry sometimes. It can be a little overwhelming sometimes. It can be a little difficult to comprehend sometimes, and maybe even a little difficult to, try and absorb it in a way that is palatable to the mind, right? So therefore, we have to read with attention, we have to hear with attention, and we have to do it in the association of devotees. And it has to come from the Srimad Bhagavatam itself. And only then, it makes it easier for us to digest this highly technical matter. But with all these descriptions, Sukadev Goswami is making it very, very, very clear, right, that in spite of all of the various pieces of creation coming together, and through that creation, this human body and, the various parts and pieces of the human body and the senses, the sense object, the sense organs, and everything that's associated with this body are coming together. It's all coming from the single source, which is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he's making it very clear that all of this creation didn't happen by chance, and that there is a single source that is responsible for this entire creation. And that the single source is a person, right? Right now we are in this material universe, which has several coverings, and it is largely dictated by darkness around us. And therefore we need to have the sun. Every planetary, every solar system has to have a sun. And the planets are constantly revolving around the sun. Without the sun, the planets are virtually dead, right? There is no life. even the life on Earth, and what to speak about life in other forms and other planets, which we can't even perceive or see at this point in time. Scientists are still trying to figure out and find, and they're sending probes into space and stuff like that. The sun is something that we need because it dispels the darkness in this material universe. So when you look at the material universe, you have the solar systems, you have many solar systems and planetary systems that become a part of galaxies. And there are many, 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 many billions and billions of galaxies that become a part of a universe. And then there are billions of universes that are a part of creation just in the material realm that is created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's Sri Krishna. So that Sukadeva Goswami is driving home the point that, all of this creation, as amazing as it is something that's been created by the personality of Godhead, which means this personality has a form. So when you look at this material universe, the material universe is in darkness, like I was saying earlier. And there are several coverings, and we have to get through all of these coverings before we can even get to see the effulgence. And it is this effulgence which is almost, again, maybe infinitely vast in terms of, its continuum, right? That most people get attracted to, the Gyanis and, the folks who don't have the knowledge. And so they aspire and want to go and merge into this effulgence. And this effulgence, like I said, is almost, it's out to infinity. And then this effulgence extends and extends and extends. And if we were to even be able to get past that effulgence, then and only then can we start to see the form of the Lord. Right? And that is where we want to be. That is the purpose of our life in this human form. So Sukadeva Goswami is saying Krishna has a personal form. It's not just a glob of energy. It's not just a glob of light. It's not just the effulgence. It's not just this material universe, but there is a lot more beyond all of that, which is his personal form. And that he's completely independent. Now we see, and here in the Srimad Bhagavatam and other scriptures, Krishna is described and in many, many ways in his, he appears in his Purusha avatars, and then he performs several leelas in his Leela avatars, and then Guna avatars. I mean, there are so many manifestations of the Lord himself in this universe even, right? 5,000 years ago, Krishna appeared in his original form here on the material earth. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just 400 to 500 years ago. So he not only is the creator, but he also enters his creation. So, but he's never touched by that, right? The material universe is so contaminating, but the Lord himself is completely independent. So Sukadeva Goswami is driving home that point as well, that not only he is the source, and not only that he's a person, which means he has a form, but he is also independent. He is untouched by this material creation of his. So in this verse, basically Sukadeva Goswami is saying, the sense organs, the senses, the mind, the intelligence, and the soul, they're all connected. Unfortunately, we don't see these as separate entities, right? And that's because we are mistakenly identifying ourselves with this body of ours, right? So, and then to make things worse, the material energy is acting upon us constantly. And with that, the dualities are perceived by the mind. And that causes the mind to deliberate through the intelligence that is within us, right? And that is the material intelligence, which is being leveraged and is influencing the mind. And the mind is then influencing our sense organs, saying, hey, I'm getting this beautiful smell, or, oh, that is, something that I want to do differently. And we're acting depending on the modes that we're in. The mind is instructing the senses, the sense organs, the sense organs. And therefore, through the senses, and we then act differently, and we're performing these activities that in turn bind us to this material world. I mean, as an example, a man could be behind a woman who's crossing the road, for instance. And depending on, his mood and his situation, he could be in a mode of goodness, where he sees the woman and he wants to help her cross the road. Or he could be in a mode of passion, where he is, admiring her as a beautiful woman, right? Admiring her beauty. Or he could be in a mode of ignorance. And the same situation changes, where he is looking at that same woman lustfully, regardless of age. And that is the disgusting part of this material world. So we're constantly switching, depending on the state of the mind, depending on the modes of material nature that are acting upon us. The senses are reacting accordingly as per the instructions of the mind. So the senses direct the sense organs, and through them, the interactions with the sense objects takes place, and that gives rise to the karmic reactions that we in turn perceive as happiness, distress, joy, pleasure, pain, heat, and cold, and so on. So all the dualities come into play as a result of this. So this becomes a vicious cycle. As you can imagine, this becomes a vicious cycle, and it causes us to drift away from the absolute truth, thinking that we are in control and that we have more important things to do. So we become the priority, as opposed to the purpose in life. In fact, even the purpose in life becomes so disillusioned. It is distorted. And we think that distortion is actually the purpose in life, meaning that we should be taking care of this body, we should be taking care of our material desires, and that we should be in the pursuit of that material happiness. So we're constantly running behind this mirage in the desert. So by doing so, we're actually drifting away. We're drifting away from the absolute truth, right? We're drifting away from this true goal of our life. And when we do that, we're slowly but surely, and sometimes even rapidly, slackening in our sadhana. So our interest in spiritual activity starts to dwindle. Our taste for Krishna, basically it evaporates, leaving us thinking that we are in control of who we are and where we are. And this continues to a point where we actually reach a point of no return. So that is the power of Maya. She makes us think and believe that this is the pursuit of happiness. And we get so caught up in that, we don't even realize we're just suckers. Basically, we're really, we don't realize what we're being dragged into, and we get dragged into it. And then we think that is the place to be, in spite of everything. So she makes us think that, our body, our comfort, our happiness is all within the material energy. And that's all available to us and easily accessible. And the mind is so captivated, the mind share is completely absorbed in this material energy and the distractions that it has to offer. So to a point that it actually refuses to accept anything else. So the pursuit of material happiness becomes the ultimate priority for this material body of ours. And the mind is simply consumed 200%, 24/7, 365. So in spite of, the dualities, in spite of the material pain, we're completely devoid of any spiritual awareness, leave alone happiness, right? That truly should be a part of our lives. So instead, we are left in a place where everything is high and dry, and the mind is continuing relentlessly, dragging us away in the direction that is away from spiritual happiness, away from Krishna, and making us believe, that's the worst part, and making us believe that that is the best place. So we're not only drifting away, but it is also putting us in an illusion. Maya is, putting us in an illusion that that is the best thing for us to do. I mean, that's the scariest part. So if we don't have the right knowledge or the right support and guidance, we're completely lost. We're actually drifting away in space, so to speak, right? A good example is, about how the Srimad Bhagavatam gives us the example of the camel that's in the desert enjoying, chewing on a bunch of thorns, enjoying. There's blood oozing in its mouth, from the thorns pricking it inside its mouth. But the camel is not able to see that, but all it perceives is the salty taste in the blood, and it thinks, wow, this juice is so tasty, not realizing that it's tasting its own blood. There is so much pain, but the pain is completely overwhelmed by the sense of taste. And the camel, the mind of the camel is telling the camel, hey, this is great. This is tasty. This is food. So this is Maya at her best, really. So Srila Prabhupada tells us that we need to have intelligence. Now, intelligence is a part of our human form of life. And there is intelligence different to different varying degrees, even in the lower forms of life, although diminished, all the way to the point of a plant, for that matter. I mean, even if you look at certain plants, like we've read in botany when we were growing up, in school, in science, where we have touch-me-nots, we have, carnivorous plants, right, that can swallow up insects and other small creatures, right? I mean, that is also a sign of intelligence, obviously. And for the plant to be able to absorb sunlight and water and all of the various conditions to be able to create photosynthesis and nourish itself and grow and bear fruit, and that's also intelligence. So that is also intelligence, but it is in a diminished form. In the human form of life, we have the intelligence to be able to discern. And Krishna gives us this free will. He gives us the free will. The problem that we have is, if we don't use the free will in his service or in devotional service, we are basically wasting away that free will. We're actually binding ourselves to this material world. So the material energy is basically busy trying to find ways to manipulate this material energy around us and satisfy the mind. What we need to be aware is that the spiritual intelligence is something that we need to nurture, cultivate, because the spiritual intelligence is the one that needs to be awakened. That's the one that has the real knowledge as to what the purpose of this human form of life is. And the awakening of this consciousness happens only through proper association, right? Whether it is through a guru, sadhu, or shastra, right? So these are the three most important um, support systems that we have in our life. And we are so fortunate that, from the vast majority in this universe of living beings, we are that tiny, 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 tiny little percentage of people chosen. I mean, this is pure mercy that is coming down from the Lord. And we should take every bit of advantage in terms of eagerly accepting that mercy and taking to absorbing, the spiritual knowledge that's been given to us through these three support systems: Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And all it takes is just that consciousness, right? How do we change our consciousness? It's not that we're changing our activities per se, but it is the consciousness with which we perform these activities is basically the determining factor between being elevated to, a higher level of thinking, and therefore, actually getting the real happiness, the true happiness that we should in this human form of life, versus being stuck in this vicious cycle of repeated birth and death in this material world. And that is the beauty of Krishna consciousness, right? That is the genius of Srila Prabhupada for bringing us that subtle but, priceless knowledge to us. And for that, we have to be supremely grateful to Srila Prabhupada. Otherwise, we're no different than the moth that is constantly trying to get into that fire, that flame, not knowing that, the moment it enters the flame, it's completely consumed. It's gone. It's dead. It's the end of its life, end of story. We are like those moths, and we should not be like those moths, because Maya is leading us to believe, or, influencing us in a way that we believe that, hey, we're invincible, and that flame there is really, really attractive. And we're actually running towards it instead of running away from it. So it is when that spiritual awakening happens that our consciousness tells us to pay attention to the super soul. And the super soul is patiently waiting for us to come back so that we can be with Krishna in the spiritual work, free of all of these material desires, free of all of these material problems, these material miseries that are so predominant in our lives. Every moment, think about it, every moment we're dealing with some form of misery or the other. There are moments of happiness which are just flashes here and there, but they're separated by stretches of material distress. Think about it. The example that comes to my mind is, we're banging our heads on the wall very, very hard. We're banging our heads on the wall. And in between, we stop, we look around, we take a break for a few seconds, and then again we continue to bang our heads on the wall. And we're thinking that is life. That's basically what we're doing. We don't realize that by stopping this banging of our heads on the wall is going to stop that pain in our heads. So one of the things that His Holiness Ramprasad Maharaj recently shared with us was talking about how Maya lures us into a spot where we think that is the right thing to do. It basically, Maya, she basically fuels our desires. And believe me, I mean, more than believing me, but it's clearly stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam that these desires that we have are not just simply, manifesting in ourselves. The desires are there in Krishna. Because Krishna desired to taste, the tongue manifested, and from the tongue came the mouth. As we're reading in this chapter, Krishna desired to smell, and from that sense of smell came the sense organ, the nose, the nostrils. And similarly, he desired to see, and from that came the vision and the eyes, and then hearing, the ears. So the difference, though, is that these desires are spiritual desires, right? There is no material motivation, there's no contamination. Whereas this material universe that we live in is so contaminating that our desires are completely misplaced. It's all about us. It's all about our lust, so that's basically lust in many ways, right? It's not just about lusting after women. It's about lusting after food. It's lusting being, the gluttony, the greed, the ambition, the everything, the anger. There are so many things. The vices that we speak about are actually lustful desires. They are the imperfect, contaminated desires that exist in this material universe. And we are all, part and parcel of that, unfortunately. And that's a very unfortunate situation. But if we don't realize that and act upon it, we're going to continue to be stuck. And it's not like, we can do it by ourselves. It's like falling into a well, and there's no way we can get out of it, right? Unless someone throws a rope into that well and pulls us out of the well. And who's that someone? Krishna sends Guru. And it's through the Guru that we are able to actually climb out of this dark, moist, miserable, cold, and scary well to get out and see, get a life, really. So all of this, okay, so giving you that example, I'd like to share that example again, and I'm going to be leaving out some of the details, but basically, how Maya is constantly pulling us to that spot where we're completely, we've completely forgotten Krishna, we've completely forgotten our spiritual side of our human being, our being as humans. The example is actually, this is a true example where one of the brahmacharis in the temple was just getting distracted by Maya, interacting on Facebook with others, comes across this minor and starts to develop a relationship online, which then leads to both the brahmachari and this young girl to decide to meet at some place. So off he goes in his car, and all the while, he's thinking, the mind, his mind is telling him, "Hey, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Not the right thing to do." But his mind is also saying, "I want to do it, I want to do it, I want to do it, I want to do it. Let me go, let me go, let me go." And he arrives at the spot where he's supposed to meet this minor. Turns out that what's waiting for him there is not the girl, but the police. This actually happened. Too late. He ended up behind bars. And this to happen to a brahmachari, who's living in the temple. But that's how powerful Maya is. So we have to be in constant, as Prabhupada says in this purport even, we have to be in constant association. That spiritual awakening, that consciousness has to be available to us, and we should be conscious of our surrounding, of our material body and the desires that are constantly pounding us, to a point that we are not absorbed by it, but at the same time aware that this could drag us down the wrong path, and we could drift away from true reality, get us into trouble, in other words. Rather, we should use this consciousness to be in the association of devotees, in the association of the Bhagavata, right? Bhagavata as the person and Bhagavata as the book, right? Through the association that's given to us. It's given to us. We are not taking it. It's given to us. It is so easy. Prabhupada has made it so accessible to us. But still, the mind is constantly fighting us and pulling us away in a different direction, making it look like the other direction is the right thing to do. So, when we have that awakening and that taste for Krishna, when that happens, and I'm not saying it's easy because we're all fighting that. It's easier said than done because we are in this bad bargain. And Prabhupada says multiple times in his lectures and his interactions and his purports, make the best of the worst bargain. And because we are in this Dukhalayam Ashashvatam that we are in, this material universe is so frustratingly, disgustingly, overwhelmingly bad. And it wants to keep us here, life after life after life. We have to break out of it. We have to make the best of that bad bargain. And how do we do that? Is through that spiritual awakening. That spiritual awakening is something that we have to inculcate, we have to nurture, we have to listen, we have to pay attention to. And when we do that is when our devotional life begins. That's what Prabhupada says. So just knowing about it in itself is not enough, but actually relating that back to ourselves in terms of what we're doing, the surroundings that we are, and then relating that in the Sambandha Gyan, which we have through the Srimad Bhagavatam. In fact, this chapter is talking about the creation. It's talking about how all of these sense organs have come into being. But it is also telling us that Krishna is a person. And therefore, we can actually develop and build and nurture a relationship with Krishna. And that Krishna is that great personality. And when we realize that Krishna is that great personality, our love for him and for what he's doing for us and this entire creation, it gives us the impetus for us to build that relationship with something that is so much more tangible than the scientists of today believe, right? The scientists just believe everything happened by chance, everything was just nothing but a big bang. But through the Bhagavatam, through our spiritual master, we are not only understanding, but we're actually appreciating and relishing. We are getting that taste for what it means to be in that loving exchange with Krishna. And when that taste develops, that is when our devotional life begins. Up until then, it is nothing but Vaidhi Bhakti, right? We're just doing it. Regulative principles, 16 rounds. Yes, we're doing that. But it is more or less mechanical, relatively speaking. And I don't want to generalize, there are devotees that are in pure bliss. They're doing a phenomenal job. Their hearts are so pure, they're able to actually relish and they want to chant. But some of us are struggling. There are days when it is so dry and that you're so tired and sleepy, and I would find thousands of excuses not to chant. But we have to push ourselves, as Radhanath Maharaj, His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj would say, when things get really bad, when the tough get going, or rather when the going gets tough, the tough get going. In other words, we should be chanting a lot more, especially when times are difficult. When Maya is pulling us away, Maya is making us feel, tired, Maya is pulling us down, that is when we should be even more inclined and determined and resolute about chanting more. And if that becomes difficult, find association. Maybe reading is a little difficult, find association. Maybe hearing is easier, right? Pick up a lecture that you can listen to. We have so much access to, thousands of lectures Fortunately, YouTube is available to help us tap into those resources. So using technology in the service, in a way that it actually helps us get closer to Krishna and build that relationship to Krishna is what we need to be focused on. Using technology to do other things, obviously we get caught up in that, and that's Maya. We need to be conscious of and systematically change it. And it is a journey. So don't beat yourself up just because you couldn't do it today. As Prabhupada says, if you miss the concentration chanting, concentration on Krishna when you're chanting a bead, don't beat yourself up on that. About that. So because you start dwelling on that, then you're losing time. You're losing, your consciousness. You're disrupting your consciousness. Instead, the focus should be, okay, my next round or my next bead should be full or fully absorbed in Krishna and being conscious of Krishna, his presence. So when we chant like that, then we are actually promoting, we're promoting the goodness, and we're promoting the awareness and the right consciousness to help us get past, the defects and the impact of Maya. So don't beat yourself up when things go wrong, and it is a journey. Things that we should be aspiring for should be, how do we improve our practice of Krishna consciousness? How do we get to a point where we go from I have to do this to I want to do this? So when we chant like we really mean it. That's how we should be chanting, right? Chant like we really, really mean it. So when we say Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, it should be coming from the heart. It should be coming from the heart, not from this head here. And every time we chant, that chanting should be in full absorption of Krishna. Like he is here, and he is here. When we're chanting this, when we do it with full devotion, it is said, the scriptures tell us that Krishna is dancing on the tip of our tongue. So that consciousness is something that we need to cultivate. And again, if you are catching it already, you will see that there is a common thread. All of this creation, all of this discussion about creation, the personality of Godhead, and about these sense organs, and about Maya, and about all the things that we spoke about over the last several minutes is connected. It's just pointing to one singular element, which is consciousness. And it is brilliant when you think about what Srila Prabhupada has given us when he coined our movement, Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada tells us, don't remain in this area of asat, right? It's a mental platform. The mental platform is very temporary. It'll be there in one spot, and next moment it's in a different spot. So it's constantly pulling us here, there, and everywhere, and going in different directions, right? Up, down, sideways, and so on. It is asat. It is temporary. It is completely influenced by the modes of material nature. So, which means one can fall down or become prey to Maya very, very easily. Therefore, one has to remain in Krishna consciousness all the time, every time. And we cannot tell ourselves, okay, I need to take a break here, go on vacation like we do from work. And sometimes in that context, it probably is good because you want to get away to recharge. And how do we recharge? And Nityananda Pran Prabhu would tell me, Ian Hemangi would take off from work when he was working. He would tell me, they would just take off for about a week, go to this remote spot, sit there and chant the whole day. They would just sit and chant, or read the Bhagavatam, and would be spiritually, energizing. Another thing that comes to my mind is, there are some devotees who have actually done this. They've taken off time from work and actually gone to the temple and spent time in the temple. They spent time in the temple for a week, just being a part of the temple atmosphere, being a part of that temple environment, reading the Bhagavatam, attending Mangalarti, being a part of the Kirtan, having prasadam, being in the association of devotees. It's such a energizing, spiritually energizing. It cleanses the body, it cleanses the mind, and it brings us back to the natural state that we really should be in. That is our natural state. Unfortunately, we're covered and covered and covered and covered and pounded and hit and dented and bent and broken by Maya, that we forget what our true nature is, the true state that we should be in, and eventually our constitutional position, right? Swarupena vyavasthiti. So when we awaken that consciousness, we are willing and eager to serve the Supreme Lord, right? So the mind is the culprit. There is no question about that. The mind is the culprit, and it drags us into places that we should not go. So we need to be on the alert, and we should stay surrendered to Krishna. So we're stuck in this material world, and this material world is contaminated, right? In summary, we are constantly being pulled away, and we're drifting. We're drifting. Fortunately, as devotees or practicing devotees or aspiring devotees, we are in a situation, we are so fortunate that, even though we drift, we get pulled back by the mercy of the Lord, by the mercy of Guru and Krishna. We are pulled back one way or the other. It may be, a few moments, it may be a few minutes, it may be a few hours, maybe a few weeks, but we are pulled back. Krishna never lets his devotee down. Once you take to Krishna, Krishna is always there with you. He is the super soul, and in the previous example that I cited, where the brahmachari was heading towards the wrong destination, the super soul was telling him not to do it. The super soul is there within each and every one of us. But if we don't pay attention to the super soul and we still are listening to our material minds, we are bound to do the wrong thing. We're bound to end up at the wrong destination, and the consequences are very, very heavy. And in several cases, they're irreversible. Irreversible. Then you're basically stuck with that. How do you live with that for the rest of your life? So being aware, and being aware of yourself, being aware of the situation, being aware of the effects of Maya, being aware of the consequences that can come about, being aware that there is a better option, and not just a better option, the best option, which is to be spiritually conscious, Krishna conscious, is the way to move ahead and break out of this vicious cycle. So here's wishing you a fabulous new year that's filled with Krishna consciousness, filled with so much Krishna consciousness that you're bursting at the seams. And once you do that, and once that happens, there's absolutely no way Maya can get to you. Maya cannot even touch you at that point. And I'm praying that all of us continue to remain in the shelter of Guru and Krishna, and continue to read the Srimad Bhagavatam every day, and be in the association of devotees that can enlighten us, and be grateful to our spiritual master for giving us the light of the Bhagavatam, and helping us through these difficult times and the difficult situations that Maya is putting us through constantly. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.